Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to yet another edition of Truth to Power. My name is Faraz Patel. I will be in your company for the next 45 to 50 minutes. Well, on this episode, we have with us, he was a former ANC councillor in the Nelson Mandela Bay metropolitan area, but you would know him, of course, being the deputy president of the ANC Youth League. Let me welcome to the show Andile Lungisa, just to discuss the political sphere, what is happening right now in the country, and what we can look forward to with regards to the future. Mr. Lungisa, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Truth to Power.
Thank you very much, Patel, for inviting me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure having you. Mr. Lungisa, everyone wants to know, what are you doing right now? Are you still actively being part of course, the communities within the Eastern Cape or in the areas of Kebera and so forth? Are you still going there, engaging with the communities, even if you are still not a councillor?
No, you must remember, all my life I've engaged these communities. Even now, I'm still resolving all the challenges which are faced by these communities. I became known by these communities on the basis that I've been working with them, not because I was a councillor. The issue of a councillor, it was just temporary.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up this question, Mr. Lungisa, because of course the challenges still remain within the Eastern Cape and the people of that area. So what do you think, what more needs to be done now to try and help the people? Because we've seen, obviously, in the media and so forth, that the struggles remain there. So what needs to be done more just to help the people with regards to the Eastern Cape area? Because we know it's such a big area, but it's still very underprivileged.
Now we have to continue pushing, especially when it comes to the national government, because provinces like Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, they are not properly funded through the equitable share. Because you know, Eastern Cape province, number of people, they leave the province, they go to the areas like your Cape Town, your Johannesburg, because those are the centers of industrial areas, those are the main cities. Now, when Eastern Cape is given money, is given based on the number of population in the province. But each and every December, people from Johannesburg, from Cape Town, they will then go back to the Eastern Cape once there's not enough resources to build the infrastructure to make sure that the communities are better. National government must be able to assist the Eastern Cape to put more resources in the Eastern Cape, also in the province like KwaZulu-Natal, because they must know those provinces are very vast, they are very scattered, they were not properly funded during the apartheid times.
Mr. Lungisa, obviously COVID-19 has had a huge effect with regards to especially the communities within the Eastern Cape. What now more needs to be done to try and help the people with regards to not just when that vaccination rollout does happen, but just trying to improve the healthcare within that province, because we know that the healthcare has taken a severe hit. So what more needs to be done just to help the people within that province to at least get them to survive what could be the potential third wave when it does arrive in the winter months?
I think we must admit in the Eastern Cape that the then MEC of Health, Cindy Swakomba, including the MEC of Public Works, Babalo Matiwane, including the Premier of the province, Oscar Mambuya. And I think they worked under pressure, but they worked very well in making sure that there's a turnaround strategy in the Eastern Cape of putting infrastructure in various hospitals. I think we need to continue renovating the hospitals. The work which have been done during COVID needs to be continued. I think we also need to build more of in terms of clinics, there must not be small clinics, there must be more of mini hospitals, especially in the villages. If a person goes to a clinic, he must be able to receive all the medical care which is required by that affected individual. I think it's what we must be able to do, also to keep the legacy of COVID in our communities in terms of the economic spin-offs. I think that's the task which we must be able to undertake in the Eastern Cape, also the issue of unemployment, especially amongst young people. I think it has to be the focus to be able to create packages for young people in the Eastern Cape where we can be able to intervene and help them, especially when it comes to food production in the agricultural areas, because Eastern Cape is a rural province where it's got pockets of lands which they can be developed by youngsters. I think it has to be our focus as we live post-COVID. But we are praying that there must be no third wave, because number of people, families, they've been affected in the past in the Eastern Cape won't be able to stomach any wave which can come.
Andile, you obviously mentioned youth and land and the agricultural part, and we are going to be discussing what's the future of the youth in this country and Section 25 of the Constitution. But Mr. Lungisa, I just want to touch on the new name for obviously Port Elizabeth, Gqeberha. Now, I'm trying to slowly but surely pronounce it. I hope that I've said it right. Maybe you can correct me. But just for the viewers to give them an understanding of what the name Gqeberha, what it originates from, and why was it so important to rename Port Elizabeth into this new name?
No, it is important, not only Port Elizabeth, it is important to do away with all the colonial apartheid symbols in the country. We have a responsibility of even changing the name called South Africa, because we are not south of anything in this continent. We need to revive the actual name of our own country. If I go back to the issue of Gqeberha, I will give you how events evolved. You must remember we had the interaction in this country with the Chinese first. If you can go to Mapunguba, you'll be able to get that portfolio of evidence. The second interaction, it was late in the 14th century to 15th century with the Portuguese sailors. After the Portuguese sailors, if you remember, the Portuguese sailors, is them who came with the name called Alcoa Bay late. And then after the Portuguese sailors, after the Napoleonic Wars in Britain, because they had poverty, there were high levels of unemployment. Their empire then expanded. They also came to the African continent. When they came to the continent, because they were expanding the empire, were then also colonized in the 1803 to 1806. The British, they were here. Later in 1820, a gentleman called Donkin, he then named the city after Port Elizabeth, after his wife, Elizabeth, who later died in Australia, in Sydney. Because people all the time, they've really taken us for a ride, a person naming his wife, his girlfriend, taking away our culture and our tradition. Because you must remember the city was already called Gqeberha then, based on the river, which was there flowing, beautiful river with a lot of water. It was called Gqeberha. Also, to give another context, Africans, they use rivers to name their areas where they've settled, because they will settle near the river to help their own livestock. They will settle next to a forest. They will settle next to a mountain to make sure that they are protected when it comes to storms, when it comes to wind. It's how Africans position themselves, as you know, that they've moved from this area to other area. That is the reality. That's the name of the area, Gqeberha. Like the name of Kareka, it was also a river. If you are in the Eastern Cape, you drive from Grahamstown, you'll pass a big bridge, which is called Kareka. If you come from the side of the Janssenville, you'll also pass a big bridge, which is called Kareka. If you come from the side of Cradock, you'll also pass this area called Kareka. Also,
We seem to have just lost Mr. Lungisa there. Obviously, Mr. Lungisa just giving us a bit of... All right, there we go. I think we have him back, Mr. Lungisa.
Yes.
Yes.
If you can see, especially in the Eastern Cape, in the Cape province, we'll have people who are called Xhosas, we have people who are called Khoisans. They mixed long time ago. You can see even myself, I'm light in complexion because in my own blood, we have already mixed a long time in centuries. We have stayed for more than 2,000 years as this community. We have already mixed. Xhosas and Khoisan is one person. There's no difference between those two groupings. That is why we'll continue fighting for our own heritage. We'll fight for our own culture. We'll fight because culture and the heritage and the arts is our own pride, which we must be able to protect as indigenous people of this country. Colonizers, they wiped us. They've changed our names. They've changed our cities. They've changed the names of forests. They've changed the names of mountains, of hills. They changed the names of rivers. We must be able to do away with all the colonial symbols in order to have our own pride back. We need Ubuntu Betu back as Africans.
Mr. Andile Lungisa, we'll be continuing this conversation after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Truth to Power. I'm continuing my conversation with former ANC councillor in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan and former ANC Youth League Deputy President Andile Lungisa. Mr. Lungisa, I just before obviously preparation for the interview, I watched your press conference in December when you were, of course, released from jail. You spoke about obviously the difficulties of being in prison. I want to ask you, what are some of the lessons that you learned being in prison, spending the time there, and of course coming out with that new lease of life?
No, I've learned a lot of things. Amongst other things, I've learned that we have half of prisoners who are in prison who have been convicted wrongly by the courts. I think we need to pay closer attention to the courts, especially magistrates and judges, because what we can see, they do as they please. They don't follow the book. There's no proper investigation. There's no proper research. We need also to pay more attention when it comes to the National Prosecution Authority, NPA, because it is clear that they go to courts of law and even present false evidence. Their ideology, also their own thinking, is not about presenting truth in the court. Most of the time, they also present untruth in the courts, where you'll get, especially those who are coming from poor communities, who do not have money to hire big legal firms, who do not have money to hire senior counsels. They get convicted for crimes which they have not made. That was the painful period. When I was there, I helped a number of people where I released them, where I organized legal teams to represent them. Some of them now, they are outside. They are enjoying their life outside because I've intervened. That's the painful period. Each and every day in PE, I go to the regional court, I go to the high court, I even go to the surrounding courts in the area called Sarapatman, making a follow-up on the injustices which they are committed on a daily basis to those who are poor in this country. Because even where they get assistance from government through the legal aid, amateurs, those who do not have experience, they get to go and represent them. Even those who represent them who comes from legal aid, sometimes they are being overworked, because we'll find out one person who's young coming from university is got cases which is managing of 30 people. That person must be in court almost every day, does not have time to make thorough preparations where he can be able to properly represent the people which he have undertaken to represent. Those are the challenges. Also, one of the biggest lessons, the mistake which we are not doing as a country, I think we must be able to implement what is called restorative justice. Before we take people for main trials and other things. Because in our own African communities, if we use what is called the indigenous knowledge systems, in our own communities, conflicts, they are managed in the communities. It's not each and everything which is taken to a court of law. But what we are witnessing, everything is taken to a court of law. In the past, if a person steals something from a shop, community will adjudicate. If a person fights with another person, community will adjudicate on those issues. There'll be peace between those families. There'll be mediators amongst those families. It's what we must be able to retain as the African community, to be able to make sure that we build strong families. There's harmony in our communities. There's peace in our communities. There's no crime in our communities. Elderly people, they don't get raped in our communities. I think we've got a responsibility as African communities to also help our government, because our government cannot do everything on our behalf. We've got that responsibility as communities. I think it's what I've learned, which I've continued to learn. But over and above, I was happy because I went there based on the Political Act. I went there on the basis that I defended my own organization. That's why even today, when I walk with my head high, because I never attacked anyone. I only defended myself, which I will continue defending myself against any other nefarious attack.
Mr. Lungisa, I want to go back in time when, of course, you served as the Deputy President of the ANC. Of course, the president at the time is the now EFF leader, Julius Malema. When you look at that youth league, a lot of people, including myself, call that, and obviously, we weren't alive during the 40s and the 50s when the late and great President Nelson Mandela, of course, was the youth league leader, and so many other great figures of the ANC were the youth league leaders. Would you say at that time that was the best period in post-democratic South Africa where the youth league really reigned supreme?
Yes, that period, I think it was a great moment in our country, but we still have a responsibility of building other greater moments in our country. Because the Youth League, which was elected in 2008, it then developed a program of action, which was then adopted in 2011 at the Gallagher Estate Conference. It followed the generation of Mxolisi Majombozi, of Anton Lembede, who founded the Youth League in 1944, because in 1948, they then came with the program of action, which is the program of action which came with the generation of Mxolisi Majombozi and Anton Lembede, which infused new energy in the ANC, which made the ANC to become a campaigning organization. That is why in 1952, we had what was called the Defiance Campaign, which was also led by a former leader of the Youth League, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, O.R. Tambo. Later, we had at the peak in our own struggle, up to a level where there was a formation of Mkhondwe Sizwe. It was that generation of youngsters. The generation of 1976, it was influenced by that generation of 1944. The generation of 1985, which responded to the clarion call, which was made by Oliver Tambo to make South Africa ungovernable. That's why we reached in this country what was called a state of equilibrium. It's because of that generation. Now our generation of Comrade Julius Malema, myself, Wiswa Tulelo, Stephen Ngobeni, Pule Mabe, it was then motivated by that generation of 1944, that let us fight now for economy in our country, because economy have been at the back. The movement in totality have not put serious emphasis on the ownership of means of production in this country. That is why we said we can no longer allow a situation where the majority, especially Africans and blacks, they'll be beggars in their own land of birth. And then we said the mining industry must be transformed. There must be nationalization. Banks must be nationalized. And then we said all the commanding heights of the economy, Africans in particular and blacks in general, they must have a meaningful ownership. More than 51% of all the commanding heights of the economy, they must be in the hands of Africans and blacks in general. We cannot allow a situation where the economy is still in the white hands of the white monopoly capital in South Africa. Even a Colgate, which I use in the morning, it is produced by the white monopoly capital. A soap, which I use in the morning, is produced by the white monopoly capital. A pap or mpokoko with sour milk, which I eat on daily basis, it is produced by the white monopoly capital. And then we said as a generation, we must be able to change that scenario, must be able to change that phenomenon. Economy in South Africa must be in the hands. That's why that generation went further to say land in this country must be able to be nationalized. Even if we are on the helicopter or we are flying from Cape Town to Johannesburg or from Johannesburg to Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape or from Johannesburg to KwaGompo in the Eastern Cape, we are flying, we'll see, if you look down, every piece of land in this country is in control, is in the hands of the white monopoly capital. They own mountains in this country. They own rivers in this country. They own forests in this country. They own hills in this country. Our people, they have nothing. That is a battle which we must continue to fight. Generations who are coming, they must join in and fight that battle. That is why we will never hear as a generation fighting one another. Comrade Julius will never fight us. We'll never fight Comrade Julius, because we agree that the land must come back to Africans. The land must come back to the blacks in this country. We will push for that idea until it's implemented.
I'm in conversation with Andile Lungisa. He's the former ANC Deputy President of the Youth League. Stay tuned to Truth to Power. You at home. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Truth to Power. Let me continue my conversation with Mr. Andile Lungisa. Mr. Lungisa, before we go into the next section, I know obviously you still maintain a strong relationship with Mr. Julius Malema. I know that you are still a committed ANC member and somebody who wants to see change, and you want to do it in the colors of the ANC. But obviously, when the EFF was founded in 2013, a lot of people didn't think that Mr. Malema would leave and form his own party. If he were to come to you, a hypothetical situation, and say, Comrade Lungisa, I want you to join the EFF, would that be something you would consider in the future?
No, I must give this historical background that from at home, my great-grandfather, Nombeu, Mhlambiso, Koboli, Reverend Koboli, they came from the area called Tsofemvaba, where my great-father comes from, called in the village of Esikobeni. If you go there, the school, the high school, including the primary school, is named after my grandfather, my great-grandfather, including the village is named after my great-grandfather. They were part of the Queenstown meeting. They were part of the Grahamstown, the King Williamstown meeting. They were part of the meeting in 1909 in Bloemfontein from the 24th until the 26th of March in the Windhoek township. in Bloemfontein, where Khobusan was elected as the first president of the ANC. They were also part of the second meeting in 1912 in Bloemfontein on the 8th of January, where the then Khobusan, because there were differences in the Eastern Cape between Jabavu and Khobusan, they then agreed that Dube must then be elected as the second president of the ANC. So I'm saying at home, where my great-grandfather was part of the founding conferences of the ANC. We don't join the ANC like any other board. We use just membership as an administrative process. We are born in the ANC. If you go to East London, you get the great-grandchildren of Jabavu. In PE, we stay there with Abokosela Mqoboli, the great sons of Reverend Mqoboli. I'm saying we come, we've got that blood in our family that were there at the beginning of the ANC. All of us at home will perish as members of the ANC. We have no other place where we can go. That is why we speak without fear and favor, because we cannot allow to run away from the truth. Because our own great-grandfathers stood for truth when they were isolated in this country, when they were marginalized. They decided that they must unify all the African people across the tribal lines so there can be a verdict, there can be an organization which can be able to champion their interests. If the organization today is failing in championing those interests, it's our responsibility to stand up, because we know this organization, where it comes from. It cannot die, it cannot be buried whilst we are still alive.
Mr. Lungisa, and on that point, I've been reading your tweets, and of course, I picked up the one of Mr. Fikile Mbalula. What do you think he's doing wrong right now? Because I see you've called him out. I see he responded to you. I know you guys have been having a tit for tat on Twitter. What is he doing right now, in your view, that is wrong, that would make you want to say, listen, Mr. Mbalula, what you're doing right now does not fit the Constitution and what the founding manifesto of the ANC is?
What you don't do, what is not being done. Just to give you a history, we had a generation in this country which formed the PAC, which was led by Mangaliso Sobukwe, who formed the PAC. We're part of the generation of Youth League. They were same generation with Mandela, with Tambo, with Walter Sisulu. They never attacked each other. They kept the decorum. That is why I said earlier, you'll never get a generation Andile Lungisa attacking Julius Malema, Julius Malema attacking Andile Lungisa, attacking Vuswa Tulelo, attacking Polamabe, Stephen Ngobeni. It's not done. It was what? A generation. A program, a revolutionary program, it is not defined only by membership. Because membership is a form. It is defined by the content of the strategy, by the content of the revolution, which our revolution in South Africa, we long concluded that we are persuading what is called the National Democratic Revolution, where we are saying we want to liberate Africans in particular and blacks in general to be able to build a united South Africa, a non-racial, a non-sexist, a non-racial South Africa, to build what is called later a society which you must be able to see, which a society must be democratic, where people they live in peace, where they live in harmony, where rights of women, where rights of downtrodden, they are elevated, which we called the motive forces, which must be able to benefit. Now, if we are a man who attacks women, we are forced to respond, because we must never allow our comrade Fikile Mbalula to attack the public protector, especially as a woman. He should have attacked Lawrence Moshwad. He should have attacked Selby Bakwa when they were in the office, another man. We cannot allow any man in this country to wake up in the morning and throw missiles to any woman in this country. We never threw missiles, even when it was Advocate Tulima Donsel. You can follow my work. We always protect women in this country. We'll never allow women to be abused. That is why we disagree on that point. But I think as a generation who are in the ANC will then find one another as we move forward.
So we shouldn't take this as a personal sort of battle between the two of you, because I know obviously when his reign as the Youth League president ended, obviously came your generation, the generation of yourself, Mr. Pule Mabe, and of course the president at the time, Mr. Julius Malema. This is not a personal vendetta, am I right?
No, it's not personal. He knows we always supported him, even when he was not wanted in the structures of the ANC. We stood with him. We always defend one another as a generation, but when there are disagreements, we also speak frankly and open, because we don't like anyone amongst ourselves who must change 3 times a day or 4 times a day. Our comrade Balula has got that limitation of changing. In politics, we don't change views all the time, because those who are working with you, they will also lose faith, they will also lose trust in you, because they cannot depend on you. Because when you go to war, you will be a danger to those who are going with you in war. It will be what is called a third column. Once they've digged a bigger trench, a person is dropping bombs in the trench, and then is injuring his own colleagues, his own comrades, his own friends. You must stick to principle. We will continue teaching one another at that level of principles. Yes.
Mr. Lungisa, before we go to the break, obviously the whole debate was around Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. In your view, do you feel that she is being mistreated, unfair or mistreated by the public, especially, of course, the DA, who has, of course, taken this motion to have her removed?
Yes, she was mistreated, targeted by a chauvinist from the DA, a man called John what stays, and I don't even know how to call his name. A man who has been found in the court in the Western Cape that he has lied in the affidavit in the case which he opened against Bongo, where he lied under oath. The South African media, no one says anything about the man who lied in court. Is the man who was fighting against the public protector. We must remember their history. Those are the particles of apartheid in their veins. Apartheid blood is very strong in their veins. That's why we've got a responsibility of defending a strong woman against the agents of the white monopoly capital who are attacking Busisiwe Mkhwebane. That's our responsibility, because she's being attacked based on the cases like your ABSA case. When she said ABSA must be able to pay back the money which they took illegally from the Reserve Bank, that is the main issue. Other companies who wanted to capture the ANC towards Nazareth Conference, who put together almost $1 billion. They are also using, they are also working underground, attacking the public protector. They are funding number of media institutions that there must be a concentrated campaign to tarnish the image of the public protector. Every person in this country, including courts, judgments, they got overturned. If you lose a case in the lower court, you go to the upper, to a regional court, to a high court. If you lose it in the high court, you go to the Supreme Court. If you lose it to the Supreme Court, you go to the Constitutional Court, which is the apex court. They get overturned. Many cases, there's no judge which have been chased like which is being done to the public protector. There's nothing wrong for cases to be overturned which have been presided by over the public protector. It is allowed in that law which governs that office of the public protector. If you've got an issue with the remedial actions, you can take the remedial actions for review. Why that passage was made in terms of the law.
Mr. Lungisa, we will be continuing this conversation after the break to wrap up this section and this episode of Truth to Power. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Truth to Power. I'm continuing my conversation with former ANC councillor in the Nelson Mandela Bay metropolitan area and the former ANC Youth League Deputy President, Mr. Andile Lungisa. Mr. Lungisa, I just want to turn the attention to, of course, what has been happening with former President Jacob Zuma. I know that you have been a very staunch supporter of Mr. Zuma in the past. When looking at the cases that have been piled up against him, when looking at what's happening at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, the same question I'm going to apply to what I asked with regards to Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. Do you feel former President Zuma has been treated unfairly by, number one, the State Capture Commission, and number two, the courts?
Look, I put at this point, luckily, I've supported all the former presidents of the ANC. President Mandela, I know his house in Gauteng. I know his house in Ekun. I went even Ekun. Even when the old man was buried, I was at Ekun. Even when the old man was sick, I was there. Even sometimes standing outside, putting a flower, showing the love and the support of our liberation hero, President Mandela. President Beki, I did the same. I'm still doing the same about President Beki. You will never hear me speaking ill about President Beki, because I know he's a former president. He's our liberation hero. President Zuma, I do the same, because I know President Zuma is like President Mandela and President Mbeki. He's also our liberation hero. Where I've got an issue is for anyone to attack our liberation heroes. Even if you go to a most liberal country called America, all their war veterans, they give them medals. That's why we will never touch Colin Powell in America, because it was a war hero who fought in the Vietnam War. Whilst we disagree with Americans on the question of the Vietnam War, but you will never disagree with Americans how they honor their own war heroes, which President Zuma is not different. He's also a war hero in our context in South Africa. My point, I will continue to argue that let's leave President Zuma in peace and calendar. We cannot harass President Zuma about cases which they've took for more than 15 years. The NPA must trap and drop those charges against President Zuma. The Constitutional Court, through this application which was put by Chief Deputy Justice Justice on the chairperson of the inquiry on state capture, it must drop that matter in the Constitutional Court. We cannot attack a senior citizen in this country. We attack President Zuma. That is why in a number of African countries, they descend into chaos. Luckily, I've worked in all the African countries when I was the president of the Pan-African Youth Union, which is a chapter of the African Union. I was in Ethiopia. I was in Khartoum, Sudan. I worked on the new country called South Sudan on the question of secessions. I was there. I know what is happening when a country can easily descend into chaos. when we attack the former president, because now the main focus in this country is not on President Ramaphosa. You see, we are not asking me about what President Ramaphosa is doing to develop South Africa.
No, I was getting to that question. That was my next
President
question.
Zuma. It was the main focus.
Mr. Lungisa? We just seem to have lost Andile Lungisa there. We're going to try to reconnect with him. Of course, I was just asking the question with regards to what was happening with the Constitutional Court ruling that former President Jacob Zuma needs to go ahead and attend the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, and of course the pending arms deal case that will be happening later on in the year with regards to whether the former president will be going ahead and attending that case. We will be trying to get through to Mr. Andile Lungisa in a bit just to continue to wrap up our conversation. We are a few minutes away from ending this conversation, so we will try to reconnect with him to try and get him through and continue this conversation. Well, the conversation, of course, centered around obviously his role during the ANC Youth League at the time. Of course, a very strong leadership during that the era of the late 2000s. And of course, Andile Lungisa did serve as the deputy president to Julius Malema, who was the president, and he now is, of course, the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters. So just a background, of course, on his role within the ANC and, of course, what he did to obviously help during those early years. Of course, another background, obviously, was part of the students' organizations at the time where South Africa was really volatile, and he of course played a role in trying to liberate especially black Africans at the time to try and get them involved there. So we are going to try and of course try and get him back. We do have a few minutes left. Mr. Lungisa, I think I was just continuing the conversation with former President Zuma, and now I want to ask you about current President Cyril Ramaphosa. But I want to ask it in terms of the context of developing the youth. Of course, you being part of the Youth League, what implementations does he need to do right now to help the youth? There's no denying that youth unemployment is currently the highest at the moment. What needs to be done? You, of course, were part of the Pan-African Youth Development Agency, which was, of course, part of the African Union. So what needs to be done now in order for the current president of South Africa to implement infrastructure plans to help our youth? Okay, I think his audio seems to be giving us some problems there. Mr. Lungisa, if you can just put your audio on for us, please, then we can...
Yes.
Yes, okay, we got it back there.
Yes, what needs to be done is to mainstream youth development in South Africa. But we need not a sweet-tongue approach. We need, I'm making a plea to President Ramaphosa to take charge and lead fearlessly on the question of youth unemployment in South Africa. You need all the state institutions, including the institutions which deals with funding. Your ITC, they must have set asides for youth. National Empowerment Fund, they must have set aside for youth. PIC, they must have set aside for youth. Safer, they must have set aside for youth. Banks must be compelled not to want guarantees, not to put guarantees as a requirement when it comes to the youth. The guarantees which youth must be able to submit in this country is only their ideas. We need our government to introduce a legislation which must force any funding institution to take a sizable number of young people to give them space and opportunities so youngsters can be able to demonstrate their talents. It's how we're going to be able to fight unemployment. Government departments, is either national, provincial, or local. They must also have set-asides for youth. They must be able to report what they are doing when it comes to youth development. I'm not talking about lip service. We must be able to see young people in action from those various government departments, including the funding institution. I think it's what can be done because we've got experience. We have implemented best models in all the African continent. All the 54 African countries ratified the African Youth Charter, which we developed. They adopted the African Youth Charter. It was domesticated in a number of countries. It was implemented in a number of countries. Even South Africa were one of the countries which will put our signature on that document. It's what we need to do. All the plans, all the policies are there in relation with youth development. But what we also need is for institutions like the NYTA to be capitalized, to be given money. Since the founding of the NYTA, it was never given money. It was never capitalized. The money which it used is the money which came from Umsomo Youth Fund. I think it was 350 million and 20 million from the National Youth Commission. It was 370 million. That's the money which carried the NYTA, which used to get interest based on the inflation of the country. Youth development, it was never capitalized in South Africa. That's the biggest mistake since 1994. It has been put not as a main agenda. It has been put not as a top priority. That's the main issue. That's why even the modeling, the discussions of 1994, 1995, 1993, a settlement became around the issue of the Youth Commission, not a ministry. You need to go back to a broader discussion that in this country, in order to mainstream youth development, vertical and horizontal, a youth ministry, it is needed in South Africa because the number of young people are unemployed. It then confirms that the models which we have used, they have not been effective because we have young people in this country where their voice is not represented in cabinet meetings. Because decisions in South Africa, they are taken in cabinet meetings. Now the youth voice, it is not there. It's somewhere in migrant in the offices of the NYTA. The broader discussion is to establish a youth ministry which is going to have a plan which is going to force all other departments to implement youth development in South Africa. That will be my proposal, is what I will advocate for, even in the structures of the ANC, that we must revise the matter of a youth ministry so we can then take youth development can be fast-tracked.
Well, that's something I would definitely agree with you on, a youth ministry led by someone who is, of course, in the ages of the youth and can speak to the youth of the country. Mr. Lungisa, there was so much I would like to have spoken to you about, but unfortunately, time has permitted us to restrict this conversation. But we'd like to have you again on the show, just on this very show, just to continue speaking on the matters with regards to South Africa. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you very much, my brother, and the viewers. Thank you very much. It's highly appreciated.
No, it's a pleasure having you. That is, of course, Mr. Andile Lungisa, former ANC councillor in the Nelson Mandela Bay metropolitan area, and of course the former deputy president of the Youth League. Well, that's all we have for you here on Truth to Power. Do enjoy the rest of your week and your weekend. Please do stay safe as COVID-19 continues to affect South Africa, even if we are in stage 1. From myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the Truth to Power team, enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend and your week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.